Today we have a little bit of a difficult question because there's various ways to answer it. But anyway, since I was asked, I will do my best to answer it. And that's about abusive relationships. Should someone stay within an abusive relationship? Abusive means it could be sexually abusive, it could be physically abusive, or it could be emotionally, psychologically abusive. The first principle is always we try to save the marriage, and we want to see if the abusive person can be rehabilitated. We also want to see if the abused person is not so traumatized that they would find it difficult to trust the abuser even if the abuser did rehabilitate. But that would be the first step of action. Is the abuser willing to be rehabilitated, take help to heal himself or herself, heal whatever it is that's causing them to be physically, sexually, or verbally abusive? And do they even realize they are? And do they even think there's anything wrong? Of course, that's always where we want to start. We want to try to help keep marriages together. That was Prabhupada's desire for the benefit of the couple. Now the question is, inherent in this question is it actually beneficial for the couple to stay together? Is it beneficial for the abused person to stay together? Is it even possible for the abused person to stay together? Now, if they can stay together, and if, let's say in this example, the wife's being abused and she wants to help her husband, can she do things that would help him? Is he willing to get professional help to deal with the problems he has? Can we do that? Is that possible? That's possible, and we believe that these changes can be made and the situation can be rectified. That's the first choice. But the person who asked this question, I don't think was asking that question. I think they were asking the question is, what if it can't be changed? Should the wife stay in the relationship? We use the wife as an example of one being abused, and should we use the example of Srila Prabhupada's sister, who stayed in the relationship and eventually the husband became rectified? And I think that question is not universally answerable because it depends on the situation. How much are they being abused? How often are they being abused? How much can that wife tolerate? Is she being damaged psychologically or physically? Is it dangerous for her? Is it dangerous for the children? Is it unhealthy for the children? Now, I have read that often in an abusive family, the children are harmed more, even if there's no abuse towards the children, than the spouse by seeing the abuse. So sometimes we say, well, they should stay together, but actually by staying together and allowing the children to see the abuse, they're becoming harmed in some cases in very, very deep ways. They become somewhat dysfunctional and they don't do well in school. They have relationship problems and they develop personal issues that come out in their adult life. So that is something to consider. So now we're considering on a practical level, not just a philosophical, this is your dharma, stay with your husband, stay with your wife. That's the principle of dharma. But now when you're dealing practically and looking, well, what's actually happening? Then we look at the woman. If the woman is being verbally abused, physically obviously there's dangers, sexually obviously there's dangers, and verbally has the danger of psychological abuse, but the other forms of abuse also can have psychological effects where the woman is worn down, where she loses her self-esteem, her sense of worth, her value, and so on, and becomes somewhat dysfunctional in that environment and cannot even execute affairs of the material world well. And her health is being disturbed by the stress of the situation. She could become depressed and in some cases even suicidal, because suicidal tendencies follow depression. And so if it's going in that direction, we don't want to just say, well, you should just stay. But if it's actually dangerous for that person psychologically, or even coming to the verge of suicidal thoughts, we have to take care, we have to take note. So then we might say, well, it's better they separate. separate. It's better they live together. Then the question comes, what about divorce? Can divorce be allowed? Now we know Prabhupada said, well, if you can't live together, then you separate and don't remarry. That was Prabhupada's desire. Okay, so that again would be the next first choice. If they can't stay together, then we realize it's unhealthy for them or dangerous. They should be separated or even divorced, but they shouldn't remarry. Then the question comes, number one, what if it's not possible? What if the woman or man is very young? What if they have young children? They can't take care of them. They need someone to help them. These are all situations that will have to be dealt with on a one-on-one basis. Now, how involved was Prabhupada in his disciples' marriages? Well, in the beginning he was more involved. Later on he was less involved. There were lots of divorces. He was disgusted with it and he didn't want to be involved with it. And so many devotees have had bad marriages, unfortunately, and have remarried, and they're doing well in Krishna consciousness. They're respectable devotees, and circumstantially or karmically, their first marriage didn't work, but they felt unable, although they would have liked to, remain single, but they were very young, and they felt unable to do it, and they felt it would be better for their Krishna consciousness to go ahead. But at that point, for many, Prabhupada didn't deal with those things. He didn't want to deal with it. And you could say, in a sense, he kind of turned a blind eye to it and let the devotees make their decisions and take their responsibility. But we do have examples of devotees who were in situations where their marriages couldn't stay together. And they felt that they couldn't remain strong in Krishna consciousness unless they remarried. It was a choice perhaps Prabhupada would not have wanted to be, but for many devotees, I think it was the only choice they could make if they were to remain stable in Krishna consciousness. It's just a reality. So now, what is the answer? Well, the answer will depend on the individual. It will also depend on the culture, because in some cultures, once you're divorced, you have really no shelter anywhere. And there's no question of remarriage. Sometimes your parents won't even take you home. And so a lot of times you'll stay in the marriage and tolerate it for the benefit of the children, because you have no financial support, you have no money and so forth. So what that has led many women to do today is become well educated in the event that such a thing happens and they're being abused, they would be able to take care of themselves. It's an unfortunate situation, but it's a reality. And my answer to this question would be, we have to deal with the realities, and we have to look at the issue in as broad a way as possible. And we have to do ultimately what's best materially and spiritually. And that will depend a little bit on the individual, on the culture, on the level of tolerance, on the values. And ultimately, I think a lot is really going to depend on how damaged that person will become staying in that situation, and are there real physical challenges or mental health or emotional challenges that could throw one into severe depression and possible suicidal tendencies if one remains in that situation, and how destructive is it potentially for the children. Hare Krishna.